today's video, I'm doing a big batch cook of lunchbox staples and comforting autumn dishes. There's something about this time of year that makes me want to slow down a little. The mornings are cooler, the air feels crisp, and the colours of the trees are starting to shift into deeper, richer tones. Walking through the woods always reminds me of why I love this season so much. So let's head back from the woods, step into the kitchen and get started. Autumn is my favourite season and my husband's been really sweet this year and got me a little boo basket. So I thought I'd share what was inside. My daughter did help him pick these things because she knows how much I love pumpkins. So they went to Primark and M&S. Most of these things are from Primark. This cute little pumpkin plate and casserole dish, although I'm slightly scared to cook anything in this. I think I might cook it in something else and then decant. But it does say it's oven safe up to 200 degrees. These sweet autumn tea towels. I always think tea towels are a great way to bring a little bit of the season into the kitchen because they don't cost very much and they always look really nice, as well as being useful. I think that's what my husband was thinking with these coasters as well, because we were running short on coasters. So we got a little pack of 4 pumpkin coasters, which I will use all year round because they match our kitchen colours and I just love pumpkins. And finally, this tin of Very Moorish Munch from M&S was a bit of an extravagant treat. We used it for a family film night, but it's really delicious. We still have the tin, so I'm going to try and fill it up with something similar myself. Okay, so now we're moving on to the batch cooking, and that always starts with a food shop. I normally get a delivery from Asda, but this week they didn't have any slots available, so I got this order from Sainsbury's. I try to keep my food shop below £70 a week, and this week it was £62.84. So I got kale for our guinea pigs, the celery is for the butternut squash soup I'm going to make, baking supplies of flour, sugar, butter, fruit and veg. My son's on a bit of a melon kick this week. I got a big tub of yogurt as my husband and daughter love having that for breakfast. And Weetabix as some cereal. Son likes that for breakfast, but only if I add a bit of chocolate spread. They have these larger tubs of pesto at Sainsbury's and my kids will only eat this brand of pesto, so I got one of those. And some jelly. My son loves this and it's such an easy pudding to make. We still have some stuff in the freezer from previous weeks, so I don't buy everything we need every week. I try and use up what we've got as well. The first thing I do on a big batch cooking day is to make the doughs that I'll be using. So on this day, I started off with a double batch of white bread. I do this first because although it doesn't take much time at all to mix up all the ingredients, it does take time for it to prove and then have its second rise. I used to have a bread maker, but that stopped working, so I started using my stand mixer and the dough hook instead, and I don't think it makes it any more difficult. Just add all the ingredients into the bowl and then mix it roughly with a spatula or a wooden spoon, and then let the stand mixer do its thing. I have a Kenwood K-Mix, which was a wedding present 11 years ago, and it's still working really well. I just put it on speed 1 or 2 for 7 to 10 minutes. And while it's kneading, I then start on my next cooking project. So although in this video I've put everything in kind of each dish separately, so you'll see the bread from start to finish, I did actually make the shortbread while this was doing its thing. So this then goes into an oiled bowl and I'll cover that with an oiled piece of cling film and leave it for about 2 hours or until it's doubled in size. The length of time that this takes varies depending on the temperature of the room, so I generally go by sight rather than timing how long it's taking. So this is now going to skip ahead to the dough being risen, but obviously I did make a lot of other things in the time that was happening. Once the dough's risen, I punch it down and then shape it into loaves by tipping it onto a flour-covered chopping board. And then I have this pizza dough cutter, which we got when we got our barbecue. I just use that to divide the dough, and then I shape it into loaf shapes. And they go into some oiled loaf pans that I have. They're, I think, the 2-pound size loaf tins. I do this quite roughly. As I always say, this doesn't have to be perfect. It's just for me and my family to eat. So I'm not going to try and make it look amazing. My aim is to get as much done in as short a time as possible, but to make sure that it still tastes good. I'll put the recipe that I use for this white bread on my Substack, which is linked in the description below. I post my most used recipes over there and you can sign up to get them sent directly to your inbox. Once the dough is shaped into loaves and in the loaf tins, I cover it again with a piece of cling film for it to have its second rise. This doesn't take as long as the first one, maybe half an hour to an hour. Then I bake them in the oven at 200 degrees fan for 40 to 45 minutes. I'll allow them to cool in the tin for maybe 5 minutes before taking them out so they don't sweat too much in the tin. And once they've cooled completely, I'll slice one up and put that in a freezer bag, and that goes in the freezer so I can use it for toast, or I can defrost that by leaving it on a plate for an hour or so and use it as bread, but normally I just use it for toast. Other loaf goes in the bread bin for us to eat fresh. So while the dough for this bread was on its first prove, the first thing I made was jelly. Such a simple option for weeknight puddings and so easy to make. I just used the little goo pots that you can get and used those for individual portions of jelly and stuck them in the fridge for my son to take out whenever he wants a quick pudding after dinner. My daughter's not a fan though, she prefers ice lollies. So then they just go in the fridge and they only take a few hours to set. They were set by the end of my batch cooking day. Try and save Pringle lids to put on the top of goo pots, but I only have a couple at the moment, so I did use some cling film for the other two. So the jelly was a quick interlude between the two types of dough I made on this day. After I'd done that, I started on my buttery bread rolls dough. The recipe for this is also on my Substack, and I have done a short of it as well, which I'll link to this video if I can. I do post most of my recipes into individual shorts as well, so make sure you check them out if you're looking for something in particular. While I was measuring out these ingredients, I realised I was low on salt. I keep coarse salt in bulk so that I can use it whenever I need it in the different forms. This was some Droitwich rock salt, I think that's how you say it. And I've just replaced it with a big tub of Maidon sea salt, which is produced in a similar region to where I live, so I wanted to try that. So my family love these rolls. They're kind of like brioche and they're perfect for packed lunches, for burgers, to have with a little bowl of soup. And they also freeze really well as well. I also like to freeze them pre-filled, so I'll put either cheese or ham or cooked chicken into them and then wrap them individually with cling film. They go in the freezer, and then when we want to have them for lunch, we can pull them out in the morning and they go into a lunchbox, and they'll also keep the other food in there cool while they're defrosting, and by lunchtime they're perfectly ready to eat. This dough comes out quite a bit stickier than my regular bread dough. It follows the same process as the white sandwich bread, so let it rise until it's doubled in size and then punch it down. That then gets shaped into individual bread rolls, and then they are covered in cling film again for their second rise. This doesn't take long, like with the other dough, half an hour to an hour until they've kind of got a little bit puffier. Then before they go in the oven, they get given an egg wash. So you reserve some of the egg that you put into the liquid mixture earlier on, and brush that over the top of the rolls. And they get baked in the oven at about 190 or 200 degrees for around 25 minutes. As I've mentioned in a few of my videos, we try and keep our food budget below £70 a week. And this is the reason why I make a lot of bread from scratch, as I do find it works out cheaper, and it also doesn't have any added preservatives that we might not want in there. When we had to reduce our food budget, I went through everything to try and see where we were spending, and I realised that it's the ready-made foods like the snacks and the pizzas and that kind of thing that we were buying that really add up. Like a ready-made pizza now can be like £6 or £7 if you get it from the fridge and it's one of the posh ones, and the snacks are like £2-3 a pack. So it really does make a big difference if you cut them out of your budget. I've been finding the more I make from scratch, the less I've been spending at the supermarket. So next I'm making shortbread, which is so easy to make, and it only has 50 grams of sugar, so it's great for lunch boxes. Recipes on my Substack too. I just made plain shortbread on this day, so it's just butter, sugar, plain flour, vanilla essence and a pinch of salt, but you can add extra ingredients like chocolate chunks or nuts to give it a little bit of extra flavour. This is really delicious and stores really well in a tin, and it's also really fast to make, so if we run out of snacks midweek, it's a good option to do on a weeknight. Can roll it out and cut it into biscuit shapes, or at Christmas time we do it in like Christmas trees and gingerbread men shapes, but if I'm trying to be fast and we just want something for a normal week, I just squash it down into a baking tray, and that saves on washing up biscuit cutters and rolling pins and things. That needs to be baked at about 170 degrees fan for 15 to 20 minutes until it's slightly golden brown on the top. So I just let that cool in the tin for about 5-10 minutes, and then cut it into the portions, and then I'll take that out in the baking paper and let it completely cool. Before storing it in an airtight container. That should stay fresh in the tin for around 4 days. Next up is a super easy way to batch prep, cutting up some fruit. So I just chopped up this melon and portioned it out into 3 pots, and having fresh fruit prepped makes mornings so much smoother when I'm just trying to grab stuff and get it into their lunch boxes. I only do 3 days because that's about how long the fruit will stay fresh, and I have these super cute little fruit forks that I got on Amazon. I'll leave an affiliate link in the description below, but they're great for stopping sticky fingers at lunchtimes. We go through different fruit options for lunchtime, so sometimes they'll have grapes or apples or satsumas, just depends on, I think, what way the wind's blowing, what they'll eat that week. And next up is popcorn. I used to buy multi-packs of crisps every week, but my son absolutely loves crisps and he would eat them all before the end of the week and they wouldn't make it into the lunchbox. He also likes popcorn, and they have this, if they have a school packed lunch, they put popcorn in it instead of crisps. So I was like, okay, we're going to do popcorn instead. I'm fed up of running out of crisps halfway through the week and having to rebuy them. These don't get eaten before they get put in the lunch boxes. I guess it's just not as satisfying as a packet of crisps. But what I do to keep them fresh throughout the week is put the portions of popcorn into individual Ziploc bags, and then all of those portions go into my big reusable freezer bags I have. So I find the kind of like double bagging it, keeping that in the cupboard, keeps them fresh. So they just take a little packet of that in their lunch every day. I do all sorts of different flavours. So this week I did salt. Sometimes we do sweet and salty. I've also done salt and vinegar before, and a sweet cinnamon popcorn. Popping your own corn is so much cheaper. The kernels are pennies compared to the bags of ready-made popcorn that you can get. So while all this was going on, I also had a pot of soup bubbling away on the hob. This is for my lunches and sometimes my husband's lunches throughout the week. So I'll make a massive pot of soup, and then I'll put a couple of bowls in the fridge for the next day, and the rest goes in the freezer for me to pull out. I normally put a couple of portions in each Tupperware in the freezer, so I know I've got 2 lunches whenever I take one out. The butternut squash that I got is a bag of frozen that I had in the freezer already. This soup's probably slightly different every time I make it because I just use what vegetables I have or what I've bought that week. But I have got a recipe for a similar soup on my Substack if you want one. Sometimes I'll roast the vegetables beforehand to just give them a bit more of a richer flavour, but I didn't this time. So I added onion, garlic, red peppers, carrots, celery and butternut squash. I add the onion and garlic first, let that soften a bit, and then add in the rest of my vegetables. I love using this vegetable chopper that I've got. You can get it on Amazon, and it speeds things up so much. I'll put a link to it in the description below. Once the vegetables are softened a bit, I add in my spices. This time I used turmeric, cumin, chili flakes, smoked paprika, salt and pepper, and garlic and onion granules. I also find using frozen butternut squash so much easier because I hate peeling and chopping butternut squashes because they're so hard. So once the spices have all gone in and that's had a little bit of time to incorporate a bit, I add in some stock. This time I have loads of stock that's been in the freezer for a while, so I got a couple of tubs of that out. It's still pretty much completely frozen. I just put it into the pot one at a time, frozen, and then let that melt down. Once the first lot have melted, I added in the second lot and then brought that to a boil. And then I left the pot to simmer for probably like 2.5 hours until it had thickened a bit. I did add a vegetable stock cube as well because sometimes I find that homemade stock has a lighter flavour. So I just wanted to make sure I got some good flavours going in there. Going back to reducing the food budget, I used to buy the tubs of soup that you can get in the refrigerated section. I don't like tins of soup as I always find them too salty. So I bought the tubs of soup and they're like £2-3 each. And this whole pot probably cost that much to make, and it's got about 10 portions. So again, so much cheaper to just make it yourself, and it tastes better too. Once it's cooked, I'll use a hand blender to whiz it all up, make a smooth soup. And then at the end of the day, after I'd finished all the batch cooking and this had cooled down significantly, I portioned a couple of bowls to go in the fridge for the next day, and the rest went into Tupperware and into the freezer. The next dish I'm making is a cosy autumn classic, apple crumbles, and these are pre-portioned for the freezer. My in-laws have an allotment and they've got an apple tree on there. So they had kindly given me a load of these apples and I decided to make apple crumble with them. So I start off by peeling the apples, and as they're homegrown, you do have to chop the bad bits out, but that's fine. All the apples, I think I had probably work out about 7 or 8 apples once I'd chopped some bits away. They go into a saucepan with 50 grams of light brown sugar and half a tablespoon of cinnamon. Then that goes on a low heat to simmer down for a bit, and while that's on the hob, I make the crumble mixture. I'll be putting the whole recipe for this on my Substack in the next few days, but in the crumble mixture I put oats, demerara sugar, butter and flour. And then I just crumble that together with my fingers until it resembles fine breadcrumbs. So the apples that have been simmering on the hob don't need to be completely cooked through because they will get a second cooking when they go into the oven. So I portioned those out into these individual foil containers. These are so great for batch cooking. I'll link them in the description below. You can use them for all sorts of freezer meals. They're also great if you want to gift some meals to people because then they don't have to worry about returning the pans. So I topped the crumbles with the crumble mix raw, and then they just go in the freezer with the lids on like that, and they can be cooked from frozen. So they cook at 180 degrees for about 25 minutes. The final thing that I made on this mammoth batch cooking day was a batch of raspberry jam. Again, these raspberries came from my in-laws' allotment. They gave them to me in the summer and I popped them into the freezer. They didn't give them to me all at once, they gave them to me as they picked them, so I put them all into the same bag and waited until I had enough to make some jam. The way I make raspberry jam is the simple old-fashioned way. I measure out my fruit and then weigh out an equal amount of sugar. I add in a tablespoon or 2 of lemon juice, depending on how much fruit there is. Mix that all together and then bring it to a rolling boil that can't be stirred away. I don't use a jam thermometer anymore because I find it gets in the way. I just use a cold plate, put a bit of jam on there when I think it's thickened enough, see if it's gelled. If it has, then I'll take it off the heat and put it into my hot sterilised jars. To sterilise them, I wash them in hot soapy water and then pop them in an oven at 100 degrees until the water has dried up. Put hot jam into hot jars. Then I'll screw on the lids and leave them to cool for 24 hours. They should then, if they've sealed correctly, be cupboard stable for about a year. But we usually eat it much quicker than that. I've already made a batch of raspberry jam this year that we've gone through. It's so much tastier than what you can buy in the supermarket and so much cheaper. And that's this week's batch cook all wrapped up. The kitchen's a little messy, the freezer's a little fuller, and I know we've got plenty of meals and snacks ready to carry us through the week. I always think there's something grounding about spending a day cooking. It's not just about the food, but the rhythm of it all, mixing, kneading, stirring. It's a small way of slowing down in a world that often feels far too fast. If you've enjoyed spending time with me, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more batch cooking videos. And if you'd like to see the recipes in more detail or get extra tips on stretching your food budget, you'll find links in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next week with more ideas for filling your kitchen, your freezer, and hopefully your home with a little extra comfort.